Hey guys, tonight we slip into sandals still slick with fish oil and take a seat at the most dangerous dinner table in the ancient world. What dish smelled like a rotting corpse yet bankrupted senators who couldn't live without it? Stick around, your nostrils are about to find out. In the next 2 minutes, you'll learn how a bucket of decomposing mackerel once dictated trade routes, toppled fortunes, and made chefs into cult figures. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time the craving for history hit you tonight. Trust me, the story might singe your eyebrows, but by the final bite, you'll never look at modern ketchup the same way again. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your nostrils flare as you lace up your imaginary Roman sandals and step into the dawn chaos of Pompeii's fish district. Fish heads glisten in the sun. Gulls scream overhead like tiny aerial alarm clocks. Every cobblestone seems lubricated with scales. Merchants bark prices in Latin slang that even Cicero would consider rude, yet nobody bargains over freshness. They're trafficking in leftovers. You watch a burly vendor shovel buckets of guts, eyes, and spines into a massive clay vat, then sprinkle and sea salt the way a modern influencer sprinkles Himalayan pink crystals over avocado toast. Overkill, but very on brand. As the vat fills, the stench hits you like a chariot made of dirty gym socks. The recipe is deceptively simple. 3 layers of fish waste, 2 layers of coarse salt. Repeat until the container threatens to burst. Then you seal it, and trust the Mediterranean sun to work its dark magic. Within days, enzymes chew through flesh, skin, and bone, releasing a briny broth richer than the emperor's tax collector. Despite the smell, you notice neighbors peeking over the wall, jealous of the potential profits. Premium garum sells for more than a decent villa in the suburbs. One slave ladles the ooze through a woven basket, and what drips into waiting jugs looks like liquid bronze tinged with despair. You dip a finger. Curiosity kills cats, but evidently not YouTube audiences, and taste. Surprise! After the initial blast of rot comes an addictive hit of savory sweetness that makes modern ketchup resemble tomato-flavored water. Mainstream historians agree the Romans doused nearly every dish with this stuff, from cabbage stews to roasted ostrich. Quirky gourmet manuals even recommend adding a splash of garum to watermelon for refreshing contrast, proving ancient influencers invented questionable food hacks long before TikTok existed. Still, historians still argue whether Rome perfected fermentation on its own or borrowed secrets from Phoenician traders who had been letting anchovies sweat in jars for centuries. Scholarly conferences devolve into salty shouting matches, pun intended, whenever that question surfaces. While academics quarrel, enterprising merchants brand their vats with little bronze dolphins, the first recognizable logo in condiment history. You see one salesman boast that his blend was fermented only during the waxing moon, because lunar, positive energy supposedly tenderizes the fish. Is that astrology or marketing? You shrug. Either way, his premium price tag could fund a legion for a month. Back at the villa, your host, a senator with more money than restraint, unveils tonight's main course: dormice stuffed with pork mince, honey, and of course, a waterfall of garum. The man winks, convinced the sauce gives the rodents a marine bouquet that impresses dinner guests. You try not to laugh. The only bouquet you detect is compost. Joke 1. At least the mice died doing what they loved, being drenched in overpriced fish juice. The senator giggles at his own joke, proving dad humor is older than the Colosseum. You toast him with watered wine spiked with yet another garum drizzled tonight. Mid-meal, a messenger bursts in waving a wax tablet. A garum shipment from Hispania has been hijacked by pirates, and prices just doubled overnight. Your host sighs the way modern investors sigh when Bitcoin dips. Joke 2. Who knew the real cryptocurrency was crypt crustacean currency? To stabilize supply, the Senate plans to dispatch warships, making fish sauce an official cause for naval aggression. Mainstream fact: Pliny the Elder documented how garum factories dotted the Spanish coast, fueling entire provincial economies. As you chew, you realize the empire's appetite for umami is literally steering fleets. The world's first fast food delivery service by trireme. Later, you wander into the villa's kitchen, where a cook is experimenting on tomorrow's brunch. He mixes garum with honey and black pepper, then freezes the goo in snow imported from the Apennines, inventing what might be humanity's earliest salted caramel ice cream. Quirky tidbit number 2 achieved. He hands you a spoon. The flavor is weirdly pleasant, like licking a beach bonfire. Joke 3. Congratulations, you've discovered Ben and Jerry's flavor. Deadliest catch swirl. The cook laughs until tears threaten to season his dessert. He swears the emperor will pay any price for such novelty come next Saturnalia banquet feast. As torches sputter low, you stagger to the courtyard, belly sloshing like a tide pool. An amphora of garum remains uncorked near the door, perfuming the night air with fragrant doom. You finally understand why Roman critics joke that one could locate a fish sauce factory blindfolded from 50 miles away. Still, its allure is undeniable. Your tongue craves just one more drop, proving the sauce is the culinary equivalent of toxic romance. You pause, wondering, if humanity could fall so hard for fermented trash, what modern garbage might future gourmets covet? Better hide your potato chip crumbs right now. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, signaling dawn and the start of yet another batch. You breathe deep, gag, and realize history's most shocking flavors often hide behind the worst aromas. Ready to keep exploring? The next dish on the table wriggles already. That rotting fish sauce still clings to your palate as servants will in the evening's centerpiece. A creature so magnificent it seems to have strutted straight from the god's own aviary. Emerald and sapphire feathers cascade down its flanks like liquid jewels, while its magnificent tail fans out in a display that would make modern fashion designers weep with envy. The peacock's head sits regally atop its body, glass eyes staring accusingly at the dinner guests, beak slightly parted as if about to deliver a final, indignant squawk. You're witnessing the ultimate medieval flex. A bird sewn back into its own plumage after roasting, because apparently eating something delicious wasn't enough, you had to traumatize your guests first. The kitchen staff spent 3 days preparing this monstrosity. First, they carefully plucked every feather, cataloging each one like medieval accountants obsessed with inventory. The bird was then stuffed with a mixture of crushed almonds, dates, and exotic spices that cost more than most peasants earned in a year. After roasting to golden perfection, the real artistry began. Seamstresses, yes, seamstresses, were summoned to meticulously sew each feather back onto the cooked carcass. The result is a creature that looks alive but smells like Sunday dinner, creating the kind of uncanny valley experience that would give modern diners nightmares for weeks. Your host, a duke whose wealth rivals small kingdoms, beams with pride as guests gasp in horror and delight. This isn't just dinner, it's performance art designed to demonstrate that money can literally bring the dead back to life, at least visually. The peacock's resurrection serves multiple purposes. It showcases the host's wealth, his kitchen staff's skill, and his complete disregard for anyone's appetite. Mainstream historical records show that such elaborate presentations were standard at noble feasts, where the shock value of the dish mattered more than its actual taste. The carving ceremony begins with all the pomp of a royal coronation. A master carver approaches with silver knives, bowing to the bird as if it might grant him a knightly title. He makes the first incision behind the head, and steam billows out carrying the aroma of roasted meat mixed with the faint mustiness of old feathers. The contrast is jarring. Your nose expects the scent of a living bird, but your taste buds prepare for cooked fowl. It's like your senses are having an argument they can't resolve. Here's where medieval dining gets delightfully weird. The peacock's mouth has been propped open and stuffed with burning incense, so aromatic smoke curls from its beak throughout the meal. Quirky historical accounts describe guests becoming so mesmerized by the smoking bird that they forgot to eat their own portions. Some nobles commissioned peacocks with mechanical devices hidden inside, causing the bird to breathe, smoke rhythmically, as if it were merely napping rather than thoroughly deceased. The effect was so convincing that visiting dignitaries sometimes asked if they should wait for the bird to wake up before carving. The meat itself, once you get past the psychological warfare, is surprisingly tender. Peacock tastes like a cross between chicken and duck, with a slightly gamey flavor that pairs well with the sweet stuffing. Medieval cooks knew their business. Beneath all the theatrical nonsense lies genuinely skilled culinary technique. The bird has been basted with wine and honey during roasting, creating a glaze that makes the skin crackle satisfyingly between your teeth. You find yourself wondering if the elaborate presentation is compensation for the meat's relative simplicity, or if medieval nobles simply enjoyed messing with people's heads. Historians still argue whether these resurrection feasts originated in France or Italy, with both regions claiming to have invented the practice of sewing birds back into their feathers. French sources insist their chefs pioneered the technique for King Charles V's wedding banquet, while Italian manuscripts describe similar presentations at Venetian merchant feasts decades earlier. The debate rages on in academic circles, proving that even medieval food historians can get surprisingly territorial about who invented the most disturbing dinner party trick. As the evening progresses, you notice other guests struggling with the same cognitive dissonance. A countess keeps glancing nervously at the peacock's head, as if expecting it to turn and judge her table manners. A young lord attempts to compliment the dish but can't find words that don't sound either insulting or insane. The conversation becomes increasingly surreal as everyone tries to discuss the meal without acknowledging that they're eating a bird that appears to be staring back at them with glassy disapproval. The Duke regales the table with stories of even more elaborate presentations he's witnessed. Swans stuffed with smaller birds in a Russian nesting doll of poultry, or entire roasted stags with their antlers gilded and their eyes replaced with precious gems. Each tale tops the last in sheer absurdity, until you realize that medieval nobles turned dinner into a competitive sport where the goal was maximum psychological impact per course. Remember that garum-soaked dormouse from earlier? Suddenly it seems refreshingly straightforward. By the meal's end, servants carefully collect the peacock's feathers for reuse. Waste not, want not, even when you're traumatizing dinner guests. The bones are saved for soup stock, because medieval cooks understood that true luxury meant using every part of an expensive ingredient, even if that ingredient happened to be wearing its own funeral shroud. You push back from the table, stomach full but mind reeling, wondering what other horrors await in the medieval cookbook of psychological warfare. The peacock's glassy stare still haunts your peripheral vision as servants clear the feathered nightmare from the table, but your relief is short-lived. The next course arrives on a golden platter that gleams like captured sunlight, and atop it rests something that makes the sewn-together bird look like amateur hour. You're staring at a perfectly preserved crocodile, its scaly hide glistening with aromatic oils, jaws propped open to reveal rows of ivory teeth that could still probably bite your hand off. This isn't just dinner, this is dining with the gods themselves, because in ancient Egypt, you're about to consume a creature so sacred that eating it might either grant you divine power or condemn your soul to eternal damnation. The priests flanking your dining couch exchange nervous glances as the pharaoh's food taster approaches the reptilian feast. Their whispered debates in ancient Egyptian sound like theological arguments mixed with culinary criticism, and you catch fragments about whether consuming Sobek's earthly avatar constitutes worship or blasphemy. The head priest clutches his ankh so tightly his knuckles have gone white, while his younger colleague argues that the crocodile died of natural causes, making it acceptable for royal consumption. Meanwhile, you're wondering if your travel insurance covers divine retribution for accidentally eating someone's god. The preparation ritual began 3 days ago, when temple hunters captured this particular crocodile from the sacred pools of Kamambo. Unlike common Nile crocodiles hunted for leather, this specimen lived in waters blessed by priests, and fed offerings of bread and honey by pilgrims seeking Sobek's favor. The beast was essentially a living deity with a pension plan, which makes your current situation feel like the world's most expensive act of sacrilege. Mainstream Egyptian records document elaborate protocols for preparing sacred crocodiles, involving purification ceremonies that would make modern health inspectors weep with joy. The cooking process itself reads like a religious text crossed with a cookbook. First, embalmers, yes, the same people who mummified pharaohs, carefully removed the crocodile's organs using techniques typically reserved for preparing royalty for the afterlife. The body cavity was then stuffed with lotus petals, cinnamon bark, and precious myrrh that cost more than most Egyptian villages produced in a decade. The entire creature was wrapped in linen soaked with sacred oils and slow-roasted in underground ovens for 2 full days, emerging as tender as lamb but carrying the psychological weight of potential divine judgment. Your first bite tastes surprisingly like chicken crossed with fish, with a texture that's unexpectedly delicate for something that spent its life chomping on unwary fishermen. The meat practically falls off the bone, infused with exotic spices that create flavor combinations your modern palate has never experienced. It's actually delicious, which somehow makes the whole experience more unsettling. You're enjoying a meal that might have gotten you executed in most other circumstances. The pharaoh watches your reaction carefully, probably wondering if you'll spontaneously combust or sprout divine wisdom. Here's where Egyptian dining gets wonderfully bizarre. Different parts of the crocodile supposedly grant different powers. The tail meat enhances fertility, the legs provide strength in battle, and the heart, served only to the pharaoh himself, grants the ability to speak with gods. Quirky papyrus scrolls describe elaborate menus where specific crocodile cuts were prescribed for various ailments, creating the world's first reptilian pharmacy. Some texts even suggest that eating crocodile eyes improves night vision, though historians still argue whether this was genuine belief or ancient Egyptian trolling of gullible foreigners. The dining hall fills with incense smoke as priests perform purification rituals between courses, chanting prayers that either bless the meal or apologize to Sobuk for the inconvenience. The ceremony transforms dinner into a religious experience where every bite carries theological implications. You notice other guests eating with unusual reverence, as if their table manners might influence their chances of reaching the afterlife. One nobleman actually prays over his portion before eating, hedging his bets in case the crocodile god is keeping score. As the meal progresses, the pharaoh shares stories of other divine dining experiences, sacred ibis served during festivals honoring Thoth, or ceremonial bull meat from animals worshipped as living gods before their ritual sacrifice. Each tale reinforces the Egyptian belief that consuming sacred animals transfers their divine essence to the eater, making dinner a form of communion with the gods themselves. It's like taking communion, except your wafer has teeth and used to eat people for breakfast. The evening's entertainment includes a performance by temple dancers dressed as crocodiles, their movements mimicking the reptile's sinuous swimming motions. The irony isn't lost on you. You're watching people pretend to be the creature you just consumed, while priests debate whether your soul is now blessed or cursed. The dancers' costumes are so realistic that you half expect them to snap at the audience, adding another layer of surreal theater to an already bizarre evening. By the meal's conclusion, you've consumed enough sacred crocodile to either achieve enlightenment or face divine wrath, depending on which priest you ask. The pharaoh seems pleased with your appetite, interpreting your enthusiasm as respect for Egyptian customs rather than simple hunger. As servants clear the reptilian remains, you wonder if the crocodile's spirit is now part of you, or if you've simply enjoyed the world's most controversial barbecue. Either way, you'll never look at a handbag the same way again. The sacred crocodile's divine essence still courses through your veins as you're suddenly transported from the pharaoh's golden palace to a windswept fjord where longships creak against wooden docks. The air bites your lungs with Nordic cold, and around a roaring bonfire, bearded warriors are preparing something that makes Egyptian god-eating look like a church potluck. You watch in fascination and horror as a massive Viking named Bjorn the Blood-Drinker hoists a freshly slaughtered goat above a wooden trough, its throat slit clean, crimson life force streaming into oats and barley like the world's most metal breakfast cereal. This isn't just cooking, this is a ritual that transforms warriors into legends, one blood-soaked bite at a time. The ceremony begins at dawn when the village's strongest warriors select their sacrifice. Today's victim is a prize ram whose wool was destined for trading with distant lands, but the gods demand better offerings than mere sheep fleece. The beast is led to a sacred stone altar carved with runes that supposedly channel Odin's blessing into whatever bleeds upon its surface. As the ceremonial blade finds its mark, warriors chant ancient verses that sound like death metal lyrics performed by a choir of angry bears. The blood flows thick and dark, steaming in the frigid air as it mingles with grain that will soon become sustenance for men preparing to raid distant shores. Your stomach churns as Bjorn stirs the crimson mixture with a wooden paddle carved from the mast of his first conquered ship. The consistency resembles chunky tomato soup mixed with concrete, while the smell hits you like a slap from Thor's hammer, metallic, earthy, and somehow alive with primal energy. Mainstream historical sources confirm that blood sausage was indeed a staple of Viking cuisine, providing essential iron and protein for warriors facing long sea voyages and brutal battles. What the history books don't capture is the sheer theatrical brutality of watching grown men get genuinely excited about breakfast that looks like a crime scene. The cooking process involves stuffing the blood oat mixture into cleaned sheep intestines, creating sausages that resemble dark, swollen fingers pointing accusingly at anyone squeamish enough to question the menu. These intestinal casings are then boiled in massive iron cauldrons that bubble and hiss like witches' brews, filling the air with steam that carries the aroma of cooked blood mixed with herbs that supposedly ward off sea monsters. You notice the warriors' eyes gleaming with anticipation as they watch their breakfast cook, as if they're witnessing the birth of edible courage. Here's where Viking dining gets delightfully savage. Different blood sources supposedly grant different warrior abilities. Goat blood enhances climbing skills for scaling fortress walls, pig blood improves endurance during long battles, and bull blood, reserved for chieftains, grants the strength to wield massive two-handed axes without breaking a sweat. Quirky saga accounts describe berserkers consuming bear blood before battle, transforming into unstoppable killing machines who felt no pain and feared no enemy. Whether this was genuine belief or ancient performance-enhancing drug mythology, historians still argue over mead horns in academic taverns across Scandinavia. The first sausage emerges from the boiling cauldron like a dark prophecy made edible. Bjorn slices it with his seeks, revealing an interior that looks like chocolate pudding mixed with gravel. The texture is surprisingly firm, holding together despite its liquid origins, while the taste hits you in waves, first the metallic tang of iron, then the nutty flavor of oats, followed by herbs that make your sinuses clear instantly. It's not unpleasant, exactly, but eating it feels like consuming liquid violence. The warriors around you devour their portions with gusto, as if each bite brings them closer to Valhalla's golden halls. The communal aspect of blood sausage consumption creates bonds stronger than family ties. Warriors who share blood meals become sworn brothers, bound by oaths that transcend ordinary friendship. You watch as battle-scarred veterans offer portions to younger fighters, passing down not just sustenance but warrior culture itself. The ritual transforms strangers into shield brothers, creating the social cohesion that made Viking raids so devastatingly effective. It's like team-building exercises, except the trust falls involve actual falling on actual battlefields. As the meal progresses, the warriors share stories of previous blood feasts, the time they consumed wolf blood before attacking a Saxon monastery, or the legendary feast where an entire war band ate dragon blood, though that story grows more elaborate with each telling and probably involves significant creative license. Each tale reinforces the connection between consuming life force and gaining supernatural abilities, turning breakfast into a form of primitive biotechnology that modern sports nutritionists would find fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. The evening concludes with warriors using the remaining blood to paint runes on their shields and weapons, blessing their tools of war with the same life force they've consumed. The symbolism is perfect. They've internalized the sacrifice's power while externalizing its protection. You realize that Viking blood sausage isn't just food. It's a complete warrior transformation ritual disguised as breakfast. Remember that crocodile god you consumed earlier? Suddenly divine dining seems almost civilized compared to voluntarily eating what looks like liquid death mixed with breakfast cereal. As longships prepare for tomorrow's raid, you understand why Vikings struck terror into medieval hearts. Any culture that starts the day by eating blood sausage while planning maritime violence is clearly operating on a different psychological wavelength than civilizations that consider oatmeal adventurous. The taste of Viking blood still lingers on your tongue as you're whisked away from those windswept fjords to a marble villa where Roman excess reaches its absolute peak. The dining room gleams with gold-leafed columns and silk cushions, but your attention fixes on tiny clay pots arranged like precious jewels across the banquet table. Each container holds something that squeaks. You peer closer and realize you're staring at Rome's most expensive delicacy. Dormice so plump they can barely move, their fur glistening with honey that costs more per ounce than most citizens earn in a month. These aren't just rodents. They're living piggy banks that Roman gourmets literally fattened for months before transforming into the empire's ultimate luxury snack. The dormouse breeding operation resembles a miniature Roman villa designed for rodents with trust funds. Your host, a senator whose wealth could fund several legions, leads you through his private dormouse farm where hundreds of clay pots house individual mice in what can only be described as rodent penthouses. Each pot contains a single dormouse living in pampered isolation, fed a diet of acorns, chestnuts, and walnuts that would make modern health food enthusiasts weep with envy. The mice grow so fat they can barely waddle, their tiny bodies swollen with nuts and honey until they resemble furry tennis balls with whiskers. The preparation ritual begins with selecting the plumpest specimens, a process that involves weighing each mouse like a precious gem. The chosen dormice are then subjected to a final feeding frenzy, force-fed honey and crushed nuts until they're literally too fat to escape their fate. Mainstream Roman cookbooks describe the ideal dormouse as being so rotund it can't stand upright, achieving a level of obesity that would concern modern veterinarians but delighted ancient gourmets. The mice are then dispatched quickly and stuffed with a mixture of pork mince, pine nuts, and more honey, creating a dish that's essentially a rodent turducken. Your first bite delivers a flavor explosion that's surprisingly complex. The meat tastes like a cross between rabbit and chicken, with a delicate texture that melts on your tongue. The honey glaze creates a sweet-savory combination that modern chefs would kill to replicate, while the nut stuffing adds crunch and richness that transforms each mouse into a tiny flavor bomb. It's genuinely delicious, which somehow makes the experience more disturbing. You're enjoying something that squeaked at you 5 minutes ago, and your taste buds are absolutely fine with this moral compromise. Here's where Roman dormouse culture gets wonderfully absurd. Different preparation methods supposedly enhance various aspects of the dining experience. Mice fed exclusively on chestnuts were considered aphrodisiacs, while those raised on acorns supposedly improved memory and intelligence. Quirky Roman texts describe elaborate dormouse menus where specific nut diets created distinct flavor profiles, turning rodent farming into an early form of terroir-based cuisine. Some wealthy Romans maintained dormouse sommeliers who could identify a mouse's diet by taste alone, proving that humans will create experts for literally anything if there's enough money involved. The social implications of dormouse consumption were staggering. Serving inferior mice at a dinner party could destroy your reputation faster than backing the wrong emperor in a civil war. Wealthy Romans competed to serve the fattest, most perfectly prepared dormice, creating a luxury arms race that drove prices to astronomical levels. A single perfectly prepared dormouse could cost as much as a slave, making your dinner plate worth more than most people's annual income. The economic absurdity reached such heights that sumptuary laws were passed limiting dormouse consumption, though enforcement proved impossible when senators were the primary violators. The cooking techniques developed for dormice influenced Roman cuisine far beyond rodent preparation. The honey glazing methods pioneered for mice were later applied to larger game, while the force-feeding techniques used to fatten dormice inspired similar practices for other luxury foods. Roman chefs became masters of creating concentrated flavors in small packages, skills that elevated the entire empire's culinary sophistication. It's like molecular gastronomy, except the molecules were formerly squeaking and the gastronomy involved significantly more moral flexibility. As the evening progresses, your host regales the table with stories of legendary dormouse feasts, banquets where hundreds of mice were served simultaneously, or the infamous dinner where a rival senator served dormice so small they were clearly underfed, causing a social scandal that lasted months. Each tale reinforces the Roman obsession with turning excess into art, creating a culture where the most ridiculous luxury became the highest expression of civilization. Remember that blood sausage the Vikings were so excited about. Suddenly consuming liquid violence seems straightforward compared to maintaining a rodent obesity farm. The meal concludes with servants presenting honey-glazed dormice arranged in elaborate patterns on silver platters, their tiny bodies glistening like edible jewelry. The visual presentation rivals modern fine dining, proving that Romans understood the importance of eating with your eyes first. As you finish your portion, you realize that dormouse consumption represents the logical endpoint of imperial excess. When you have unlimited resources, why not spend them on making rodents too fat to move, then eating them with honey while discussing philosophy and politics? The senator raises his wine cup in a toast to Bacchus, god of wine and excess, while servants clear away the tiny bones that represent someone's monthly salary. You push back from the table, stomach full of Rome's most expensive squeaks, wondering what other culinary absurdities await in this empire where money can literally buy anything, including the right to eat creatures that most people consider pests. The honey from those Roman dormice still coats your teeth as you're transported across continents and centuries to a bustling Chinese marketplace where vendors hawk delicacies that would make your grandmother faint. The air thrums with the chatter of merchants and the clatter of ceramic bowls, but your attention locks onto a peculiar sight: eggs that look like they've been excavated from an ancient tomb. Their shells gleam with an oily, dark patina that suggests they've survived apocalyptic events, while the vendor grins proudly as if he's selling edible archaeological artifacts. You're staring at Piton, century eggs, though thankfully they're only preserved for weeks or months, not actual centuries, because even Chinese culinary patience has its limits. The preservation process begins with fresh duck, chicken, or quail eggs being coated in a mixture that reads like a medieval alchemist's fever dream. Clay, ash, salt, quicklime, and rice hulls combine to create a paste that encases each egg like a protective sarcophagus. The mixture is alkaline enough to strip paint, which explains why the eggs undergo such dramatic transformation during their burial period. Mainstream Chinese culinary texts describe this process as a form of controlled decomposition that concentrates flavors while creating entirely new textures, though watching it happen feels more like witnessing edible necromancy than traditional cooking. Your first glimpse of a cracked century egg reveals an interior that looks like something H.P. Lovecraft might have dreamed after eating too much cheese before bed. The white has transformed into a dark, jelly-like substance with the consistency of firm gelatin and the color of strong coffee. The yolk has become a creamy, olive-green center that resembles aged cheese mixed with pond scum, surrounded by crystalline patterns that catch the light like edible stained glass. It's simultaneously beautiful and horrifying, like jewelry designed by someone with questionable aesthetic judgment and a fascination with decay. The aroma hits you before the taste, a complex bouquet of ammonia, sulfur, and something vaguely oceanic that makes your sinuses clear instantly. Your first bite delivers flavors that your brain struggles to categorize. The white tastes like concentrated mushroom broth with hints of cheese, while the yolk provides a rich, creamy texture with notes that remind you of blue cheese mixed with custard. It's not unpleasant, exactly, but eating it feels like consuming something that should probably be studied by scientists rather than served at dinner parties. Here's where Chinese century egg culture gets delightfully sophisticated. Different preservation periods create distinct flavor profiles that connoisseurs can identify blindfolded. Eggs preserved for just a few weeks maintain a milder taste, while those aged for months develop complex umami notes that rival the finest aged cheeses. Quirky historical accounts describe century egg tastings where experts would debate the merits of different preservation techniques, like wine critics arguing over vintages, proving that humans will create elaborate tasting rituals for literally anything that doesn't kill them immediately. The medicinal properties attributed to century eggs read like a traditional Chinese pharmacy catalog. They supposedly cool the body during hot weather, improve digestion, reduce blood pressure, and enhance overall vitality, basically functioning as edible medicine that happens to look like something dredged from a swamp. Ancient texts describe physicians prescribing specific types of century eggs for various ailments, creating a medical system where your doctor might literally tell you to eat more rotten eggs. Modern nutritional analysis confirms that the preservation process does concentrate certain nutrients, though historians still argue whether the health benefits are real or represent centuries of successful marketing by egg vendors. The social aspects of century egg consumption reveal fascinating cultural attitudes toward food and time. Serving century eggs demonstrates patience, sophistication, and appreciation for complex flavors that develop slowly, values deeply embedded in Chinese philosophy. The eggs become symbols of transformation and the beauty that can emerge from apparent decay, turning a simple preservation technique into a metaphor for life itself. It's like edible Buddhism, except your enlightenment tastes like fermented pond water and requires significant mental preparation. As you sample different varieties, the vendor explains the subtle differences between duck and chicken century eggs, his enthusiasm infectious despite the challenging subject matter. Duck eggs produce richer, more complex flavors, while chicken eggs offer milder tastes that appeal to beginners. Quail century eggs, tiny and precious, are considered the ultimate delicacy, like caviar, but from the dark side of the culinary universe. Each variety requires different preservation techniques, creating a spectrum of flavors that ranges from mildly challenging to existentially threatening. The preparation methods for serving century eggs showcase Chinese culinary artistry at its finest. They're sliced and arranged with pickled ginger, drizzled with soy sauce, or incorporated into congee where their intense flavors mellow into something approaching conventional deliciousness. The visual presentation transforms these potentially disturbing ingredients into elegant dishes that wouldn't look out of place in modern fine dining establishments, proving that skilled chefs can make anything look appetizing with proper plating techniques. By the meal's conclusion, you've consumed enough century eggs to either achieve enlightenment or develop a permanent aversion to anything that's been buried in clay for extended periods. The vendor beams with pride as you finish your portion, interpreting your survival as appreciation for his craft rather than simple stubbornness. Remember those honey-glazed dormice that seemed so excessive? Suddenly eating pampered rodents feels straightforward compared to voluntarily consuming eggs that look like they've been marinating in primordial ooze since the Ming Dynasty. As you leave the marketplace, you realize that century eggs represent the ultimate test of culinary open-mindedness. They challenge every assumption about freshness, appearance, and palatability while delivering flavors that are genuinely unique and surprisingly sophisticated. The sulphurous aftertaste of those century eggs still haunts your palate as you're suddenly transported to the heart of Tenochtitlan, where obsidian pyramids pierce the sky like stone daggers and the air thrums with ceremonial drums that sound like the heartbeat of gods. The great temple looms before you, its steps slick with something darker than morning dew, while priests in feathered robes prepare a beverage that makes every previous culinary horror seem like a children's tea party. You watch in fascination and growing dread as they grind cacao beans with hands stained crimson, mixing the bitter powder with liquid that steams despite the tropical heat. This isn't hot chocolate. This is Zacatl, the drink of gods, and the secret ingredient currently swirling in your cup once flowed through human veins. The ceremony begins before dawn when captured warriors are led to the temple's summit, their fates sealed by astronomical calculations that determine when the gods require nourishment. The Aztec priests, their bodies painted with intricate patterns that tell stories of cosmic battles, perform rituals that transform human sacrifice into divine communion. The blood collected during these ceremonies isn't wasted. It's considered the most precious ingredient in the empire, more valuable than gold or jade because it carries the essence of human life itself. Mainstream Aztec codices document elaborate protocols for collecting and preparing sacrificial blood, treating it with the same reverence modern sommeliers reserve for vintage wines. The chocolate preparation involves grinding cacao beans on metates, stone platforms that have been sanctified through generations of use. The beans are roasted over sacred fires fed with copal incense, filling the air with smoke that supposedly carries prayers directly to the gods. As the grinding begins, priests chant invocations to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who gave cacao to humanity, while slowly adding the crimson liquid that transforms bitter chocolate into something approaching divine nectar. The mixture froths and bubbles as it's whisked with wooden implements carved with symbols that channel supernatural power into every cup. Your first sip delivers a flavor profile that defies every expectation your modern palate has developed about chocolate. The initial bitterness hits like a slap from an obsidian blade, followed by metallic notes that remind you exactly what the secret ingredient used to be. The texture is gritty and substantial, nothing like the smooth confections you know, while spices like chili and vanilla create heat that builds slowly in your throat. It's not sweet. Sugar hasn't been invented yet, but the complexity is staggering, with flavors that seem to shift and evolve with each sip like a liquid symphony composed by deities with questionable moral standards. Here's where Aztec chocolate culture gets wonderfully terrifying. Different types of sacrificial blood supposedly enhance different aspects of the drinking experience. Warrior blood granted courage and strength in battle, while the blood of young captives provided vitality and long life. Quirky Spanish conquistador accounts describe elaborate chocolate menus where specific blood sources created distinct flavor profiles, turning human sacrifice into a form of culinary terroir that would horrify modern food critics. Some priests claimed they could identify the donor's social status by taste alone, proving that Aztec chocolate appreciation reached levels of sophistication that modern civilization prefers not to contemplate. The social implications of blood chocolate consumption were staggering even by Aztec standards. Only nobles and priests could partake in the sacred beverage, creating a hierarchy where access to human-enhanced chocolate determined your position in society. The Emperor Moctezuma reportedly consumed 50 cups daily, requiring a steady supply of sacrificial victims that strained the empire's military resources. Drinking chocolate became both religious ritual and political statement, demonstrating your connection to the gods while asserting dominance over conquered peoples whose blood literally flavored your beverage. The preparation rituals surrounding blood chocolate transformed every cup into a communion with the divine. Priests would fast for days before ceremonies, purifying themselves to become worthy vessels for the sacred mixture. The chocolate was served in golden cups decorated with precious stones, while musicians played haunting melodies that supposedly helped the drinker's soul ascend to higher spiritual planes. Each sip was accompanied by prayers and offerings, turning consumption into an elaborate religious performance that lasted hours and left participants in altered states of consciousness. As the ceremony progresses, you notice the psychological effects of consuming something so taboo. The combination of caffeine, theobromine, and sheer psychological intensity creates a heightened awareness that makes colors seem more vivid and sounds more resonant. Whether this is genuine chemical enhancement, or the placebo effect of drinking something forbidden, the experience transcends ordinary consumption and becomes a form of edible transcendence that connects you directly to Aztec cosmology. The Spanish conquistadors who first encountered blood chocolate were simultaneously fascinated and horrified by the practice. Their accounts described the drink as both delicious and damning, creating a moral dilemma that plagued colonial administrators for decades. Some missionaries attempted to ban the practice entirely, while others argued that removing the blood component made chocolate acceptable for Christian consumption. The debate raged in Spanish courts and Vatican councils, proving that even religious authorities could be corrupted by really good chocolate, regardless of its questionable ingredients. By the ceremony's conclusion, you've consumed enough sacred chocolate to either achieve divine enlightenment or face eternal damnation, depending on which priest you ask. The temple steps gleam with fresh offerings as the sun reaches its zenith, while your cup sits empty but somehow still warm, as if the liquid contained its own supernatural heat source. Remember those century eggs that looked like archaeological artifacts? Suddenly consuming buried duck embryos seems refreshingly straightforward compared to drinking chocolate that required human sacrifice for proper flavor development. As priests begin preparing for the next ceremony, you realize that Aztec blood chocolate represents the ultimate fusion of cuisine and religion, creating a beverage so sacred that entire civilizations organize themselves around its production and consumption. The metallic tang of sacrificial chocolate still coats your tongue as you're whisked away from those blood-soaked pyramids to a medieval monastery where monks in brown robes huddle around wooden tables, their faces bearing expressions of theological confusion mixed with culinary desperation. The stone walls echo with Latin chants, but today's prayers sound suspiciously like legal arguments as Brother Thomas holds up what appears to be a large, flat paddle covered in dark fur. This isn't just dinner. This is ecclesiastical fraud disguised as Friday fish, because somehow these clever monks have convinced themselves that beaver tail qualifies as seafood, making it perfectly acceptable to consume during Lent when meat is forbidden by God but apparently not by creative biblical interpretation. The theological gymnastics required to classify beaver as fish would impress Olympic mental contortionists. Medieval church scholars argue that since beavers spend most of their time in water, swim like fish, and have scaly tails, they must be aquatic creatures rather than land mammals. The logic resembles a legal brief written by someone who's never seen an actual beaver but has strong opinions about maritime law. Mainstream Catholic doctrine from the period shows that church authorities officially sanctioned beaver consumption during fasting periods, creating a loophole so large you could drive a monastery through it while carrying a wagon full of questionable aquatic mammals. The preparation process begins with monks blessing the beaver carcass as if it were a particularly large salmon, their prayers mixing gratitude with what sounds suspiciously like preemptive apologies to various saints. The tail, prized for its supposed fish-like qualities, is carefully skinned to reveal meat that looks nothing like any fish you've ever encountered. It's dark, rich, and marbled with fat that renders beautifully when roasted, creating aromas that fill the monastery kitchen with scents that are decidedly mammalian despite the theological classification. Brother Francis, the head cook, seasons the tail with herbs while muttering about canonical law under his breath. Your first bite delivers flavors that immediately expose the entire theological charade. Beaver tail tastes like a cross between pork and duck, with a rich, gamey flavor that's unmistakably mammalian and absolutely delicious. The texture is tender and slightly chewy, with fat that melts on your tongue and creates the kind of satisfying richness that makes you understand why monks were willing to engage in creative biblical interpretation to justify eating it. The meat is so obviously not fish that you wonder if medieval church authorities were either remarkably gullible or simply chose to look the other way when faced with really good food. Here's where medieval beaver cuisine gets delightfully absurd. Different monasteries developed signature preparation methods that supposedly enhance the tail's fish-like qualities. Some orders soaked the meat in wine and herbs, claiming this made it more aquatic in nature, while others served it with elaborate fish sauces to reinforce the maritime illusion. Quirky monastic records describe beaver tasting competitions where different abbeys would compete to create the most convincing fish dishes, turning theological fraud into a form of competitive cooking that would make modern Food Network executives weep with joy. The economic implications of beaver as fish classification were enormous. Monasteries located near beaver populations suddenly found themselves with access to premium protein during the 40 days of Lent, when meat prices skyrocketed due to religious restrictions. Some orders became wealthy by trading beaver meat to other monasteries, creating a black market economy based entirely on creative animal classification. The beaver trade became so lucrative that certain monasteries began maintaining their own beaver farms, essentially running aquatic mammal ranches while insisting they were engaged in fish farming. The social aspects of beaver consumption reveal fascinating insights into medieval religious culture. Monks who might spend hours debating the theological implications of eating an egg on Friday would cheerfully devour beaver tail while discussing scripture, demonstrating the human capacity for moral flexibility when faced with really good food. The practice became so widespread that visiting church officials would often be served beaver dishes without being told what they were eating, creating a conspiracy of culinary silence that protected everyone's spiritual integrity through plausible deniability. As the meal progresses, Brother Thomas regales the table with stories of other creative animal classifications that have emerged from monastic kitchens. Apparently, capybara in South America also qualify as fish due to their aquatic lifestyle, while certain water birds have been reclassified based on their swimming abilities rather than their obvious avian characteristics. Each tale reinforces the medieval church's remarkable ability to adapt theological doctrine to accommodate local food preferences, proving that religious flexibility often correlates directly with culinary quality. The preparation techniques developed for beaver tail influenced medieval cooking far beyond monastic kitchens. The slow roasting methods used to tenderize the tough tail meat were later applied to other game, while the herb combinations developed to mask the meat's mammalian characteristics became standard seasonings for various dishes. Medieval cooks became masters of transforming challenging ingredients into palatable meals, skills that elevated European cuisine despite the theological constraints that theoretically limited their options. By the meal's conclusion, you've consumed enough fish to either achieve salvation or face divine judgment for participating in ecclesiastical fraud, depending on which theological interpretation you prefer. The monks seem genuinely convinced they've consumed seafood, their faith in creative biblical interpretation apparently stronger than their taste buds' ability to identify mammalian meat. Remember that blood chocolate that required human sacrifice for proper preparation? Suddenly consuming divine beverages seems straightforward compared to eating land mammals while insisting they're fish because they happen to enjoy swimming. As Vespers bells ring across the monastery, you realize that medieval beaver consumption represents the ultimate triumph of appetite over theology, creating a culinary tradition so absurd that it survived centuries of church reform and continues to influence Catholic dietary law to this day. The theological confusion of beaverfish still swirls in your mind as you're transported from those stone monastery walls to the marble splendor of imperial Rome, where excess has evolved into an art form that would make modern billionaires weep with envy. The banquet hall stretches before you like a temple dedicated to gluttony, its columns wrapped in silk, and its floors inlaid with precious stones that spell out the host's name in emeralds. But your attention fixes on the centerpiece, a golden platter so massive it requires 4 slaves to carry, bearing what appears to be a pink mountain range crafted from the most expensive meat in the known world. You're staring at the tongues of 300 flamingos, each one representing a fortune that could feed entire villages, arranged in patterns that transform avian anatomy into edible architecture. The procurement process for flamingo tongues reads like a military campaign crossed with a luxury shopping expedition. Roman hunting parties would travel to the Nile Delta and Spanish salt marshes, armed with nets and accompanied by specialized tongue extractors whose sole job was harvesting the tiny pink delicacies from captured birds. The flamingos themselves were considered worthless. Only their tongues possessed the delicate flavor that drove Roman gourmets to bankruptcy. Mainstream historical accounts described fleets of ships returning to Rome with cargo holds full of preserved tongues while leaving behind thousands of tongueless flamingo carcasses, creating ecological disasters that would horrify modern conservationists, but barely registered with Romans obsessed with culinary status symbols. The preparation ritual transforms the banquet hall into a theater where wealth performs for an audience of equally wealthy spectators. Your host, Senator Maximus Gluttonius, whose name suggests his parents had prophetic abilities regarding his future dietary habits, personally inspects each tongue with the intensity of a jeweler examining diamonds. The tongues are arranged by size and color, creating gradients that flow across the platter like edible sunsets. Some have been poached in wine infused with saffron worth more than most citizens' homes, while others have been grilled with herbs that were transported across continents specifically for this meal. Your first bite delivers a flavor so subtle it's almost theoretical. Flamingo tongue tastes like the whisper of chicken crossed with the suggestion of fish, with a texture so delicate it dissolves before you can properly chew. The meat is tender beyond belief, requiring no effort to consume, while the preparation enhances rather than masks its natural flavors. It's genuinely delicious, which somehow makes the entire experience more morally complicated. You're enjoying something that required the deaths of hundreds of exotic birds just to fill a single plate, and your taste buds are absolutely fine with this ecological catastrophe. Here's where Roman flamingo culture gets wonderfully insane. Different tongue preparations supposedly enhance various aspects of the dining experience. Tongues from young flamingos were considered aphrodisiacs, while those from older birds supposedly improved oratory skills, perfect for senators who needed both bedroom performance and political eloquence. Quirky Roman texts describe elaborate tongue menus where specific preparations were prescribed for various social situations, creating a culinary pharmacy where your dinner could theoretically improve your love life, career prospects, and general standing in polite society. The economic implications of flamingo tongue consumption were staggering even by Roman standards of excess. A single perfectly prepared tongue could cost as much as a small farm, while a platter like tonight's represents wealth that could fund public works projects or maintain entire legions for months. The flamingo trade created specialized industries, tongue hunters, preservation experts, and transportation networks that stretched across the Mediterranean. Some wealthy Romans maintained private flamingo reserves, essentially running exotic bird ranches whose sole purpose was producing tiny amounts of incredibly expensive meat. The social dynamics surrounding flamingo tongue consumption reveal the Roman elite's obsession with competitive luxury. Serving inferior tongues at a dinner party could destroy your reputation faster than backing the wrong emperor in a civil war, while presenting a truly spectacular tongue display could elevate your social status for years. Guests would analyze each tongue's preparation with the intensity of art critics examining masterpieces, creating a culture where culinary criticism became a form of social warfare disguised as dinner conversation. As the evening progresses, Senator Gluttonius shares stories of legendary flamingo feasts, banquets where emperors served tongues from 1,000 birds, or the infamous dinner where a rival senator served duck tongues while claiming they were flamingo, causing a scandal that lasted decades. Each tale reinforces the Roman belief that true luxury requires not just expense but genuine rarity. Anyone with money could buy gold, but only the truly elite could afford to eat the tongues of exotic birds while discussing philosophy and politics. The preparation techniques developed for flamingo tongues influenced Roman cuisine far beyond avian delicacies. The gentle poaching methods used to preserve their delicate texture were later applied to other luxury ingredients, while the herb combinations developed to complement their subtle flavors became standard seasonings for fine dining. Roman chefs became masters of enhancing rather than overwhelming delicate ingredients, creating a culinary philosophy that prioritized refinement over intensity. The environmental impact of flamingo tongue consumption was catastrophic by any measure. Entire flamingo populations were decimated to satisfy Roman appetites, creating ecological collapses that affected wetland ecosystems across the Mediterranean. The birds' feeding patterns were disrupted, their breeding grounds destroyed, and their numbers reduced to fractions of their original populations. It's like modern industrial fishing, except the goal was harvesting tiny amounts of meat from creatures whose primary value was their rarity rather than their nutritional content. By the meal's conclusion, you've consumed enough flamingo tongues to either achieve gastronomic enlightenment or face judgment for participating in ecological genocide, depending on your perspective on conservation versus culinary adventure. The senator beams with pride as guests praise his extravagance, interpreting their amazement as appreciation for his refined taste rather than horror at his environmental impact. Remember those monks who convinced themselves that beaver was fish? Suddenly theological fraud seems environmentally responsible compared to eating the tongues of hundreds of exotic birds just to demonstrate your wealth. As slaves clear away the golden platter, now empty except for tiny bones that represent more money than most people will see in their lifetimes, you realize that flamingo tongue consumption represents the logical endpoint of luxury culture. When money becomes meaningless, the only remaining currency is rarity itself. The delicate memory of flamingo tongues still haunts your palate as you're suddenly transported from Roman marble halls to the austere barracks of ancient Sparta, where warriors gather around iron cauldrons that bubble with something so vile it makes every previous culinary horror seem like a gourmet feast. The air reeks of boiled blood and vinegar, while battle-scarred soldiers ladle a black, chunky liquid into wooden bowls with expressions that suggest they're preparing for combat rather than dinner. You're staring at melas zomos, Spartan black broth, the legendary warrior soup so revolting that enemy armies reportedly preferred death in battle to the possibility of being captured and forced to consume it as prisoners of war. The recipe reads like a punishment disguised as sustenance: pig's blood, vinegar, and salt, boiled together until it achieves the consistency of liquid despair and the color of midnight. No herbs, no spices, no attempt to make it palatable, just the bare minimum required to keep warriors alive while simultaneously testing their commitment to Spartan values. Mainstream historical sources confirm that black broth was indeed the staple food of Spartan warriors, designed not for pleasure but for building character through voluntary suffering. The logic was simple: if you could stomach this abomination daily, enemy torture would seem like a minor inconvenience. The preparation ceremony resembles a military drill more than cooking. Warriors take turns stirring the cauldron with wooden paddles, their movements precise and ritualistic as they transform fresh pig's blood into something that looks like it was dredged from the river Styx. The blood coagulates and breaks apart as it boils, creating chunks that float in the dark liquid like evidence of culinary war crimes. The vinegar adds a sharp, acidic bite that makes your eyes water from across the room, while the salt content reaches levels that would concern modern cardiologists, but apparently built character in ancient warriors. Your first spoonful delivers a flavor profile that defies every assumption about edible substances. The initial taste is overwhelmingly metallic, like licking a sword that's been used in battle, followed by acidic notes, so sharp they make your sinuses clear instantly. The texture combines liquid and solid in ways that shouldn't be possible, with blood clots that burst between your teeth while releasing more metallic flavors that remind you exactly what the primary ingredient used to do for a living. It's not just unpalatable, it's aggressively hostile to human taste buds, as if the soup is actively fighting back against being consumed. Here's where Spartan black broth culture gets wonderfully masochistic. Different blood sources supposedly enhanced various warrior attributes. Pig blood was standard for daily consumption, but bull blood was reserved for special occasions when extra strength was required, while boar blood was consumed before particularly dangerous battles. Quirky Spartan accounts describe warriors debating the merits of different blood preparations with the same intensity modern athletes discuss protein supplements, proving that humans will create elaborate theories about nutrition regardless of how disgusting their food actually tastes. The psychological aspects of black broth consumption were as important as its nutritional value. Warriors who could consume the soup without flinching demonstrated their readiness for the hardships of military life, while those who gagged or refused were considered unfit for Spartan society. The daily ritual of choking down something revolting built mental toughness that translated directly to battlefield performance. It's like military hazing, except it happened every meal for your entire life and was considered essential for maintaining social order. The social implications of black broth extended far beyond military training. Spartan society was organized around the principle that comfort weakens character, and the daily consumption of deliberately unpalatable food reinforced this philosophy at every meal. Wealthy Spartans who could afford better food were required to eat black broth anyway, ensuring that economic privilege couldn't undermine the shared suffering that bound warriors together. The soup became a symbol of Spartan values, austere, uncompromising, and completely indifferent to human preferences. As the meal progresses, you notice the psychological effects of consuming something so challenging. The combination of high salt content, acidic vinegar, and sheer mental fortitude required to finish your portion creates a heightened state of awareness that borders on meditation. Whether this is genuine physiological enhancement, or simply the mental clarity that comes from surviving voluntary torture, the experience transforms eating from pleasure into a form of character building that modern self-help gurus would find fascinating and horrifying. The cultural impact of black broth extended far beyond Sparta's borders. Foreign visitors who were served the soup often became inadvertent ambassadors for Spartan toughness, returning to their home cities with stories of warriors who voluntarily consumed liquid suffering as a daily practice. The soup's reputation became part of Sparta's psychological warfare arsenal. Enemies knew they were facing soldiers who considered revolting food a character-building exercise rather than a hardship. The preparation techniques for black broth influenced Spartan culture in unexpected ways. The discipline required to cook something deliberately unpalatable, while maintaining precise standards, taught warriors attention to detail and commitment to excellence even in unpleasant tasks. The daily ritual of communal soup consumption created bonds between warriors that transcended individual preferences, building unit cohesion through shared suffering that proved invaluable in combat situations. By the meal's conclusion, you've consumed enough black broth to either achieve warrior enlightenment or develop a permanent aversion to anything containing pig's blood, depending on your tolerance for voluntary suffering. The Spartan warriors around you finish their portions with stoic expressions that suggest they're already mentally preparing for tomorrow's serving. Remember those flamingo tongues that cost more than small farms? Suddenly eating exotic bird parts seems like luxurious indulgence compared to voluntarily consuming soup that tastes like liquid punishment, while pretending it builds character. As the cauldron is cleaned and prepared for tomorrow's batch, you realize that Spartan black broth represents the ultimate rejection of culinary pleasure in favor of psychological conditioning, creating a food culture so deliberately unpleasant that it became a defining characteristic of one of history's most feared military societies. The metallic aftertaste of Spartan black broth still haunts your mouth as you're whisked away from those austere barracks to the opulent gardens of ancient Persepolis, where silk pavilions flutter in desert breezes and the air shimmers with heat that makes mirages dance across marble courtyards. The scent of rosewater mingles with frankincense as servants in jeweled turbans approach carrying silver platters that gleam like captured starlight. But your attention fixes on something that makes flamingo tongues seem pedestrian. Delicate pink mounds arranged like precious pearls, each one glistening with perfumed oils that cost more than entire kingdoms. You're staring at sheep brains prepared Persian style, where the most intimate thoughts of woolly creatures have been transformed into delicacies fit for kings who believe that consuming intelligence might actually make them smarter. The procurement process for royal brain cuisine involves selecting only the youngest, most pampered sheep from flocks that graze in mountain meadows where the grass grows sweeter, and the air runs cleaner than anywhere else in the empire. These aren't ordinary farm animals. They're essentially ovine aristocrats whose entire lives have been dedicated to developing the most tender, flavorful neural tissue possible. Persian shepherds treat these sheep like beloved pets, feeding them honey-sweetened grain and spring water while musicians play soothing melodies that supposedly improve brain texture. Mainstream Persian culinary texts describe elaborate protocols for brain harvesting that involve astronomical calculations to determine the optimal lunar phase for maximum tenderness. The preparation ritual transforms the royal kitchen into something resembling a perfumer's laboratory crossed with a surgical theater. Master chefs wearing silk gloves carefully extract each brain with silver instruments, treating the delicate organs like precious gems that might shatter if handled roughly. The brains are then soaked in rosewater that's been infused with saffron threads worth more than most people's annual income, while court musicians play specific melodies that supposedly enhance the meat's flavor through harmonic resonance. The entire process takes 3 days and requires the attention of specialists whose sole job is preparing neural tissue for royal consumption. Your first bite delivers flavors that are surprisingly delicate and complex. The brain tissue has a creamy, custard-like texture that melts on your tongue, while the rosewater infusion creates floral notes that transform what could be a challenging ingredient into something approaching edible poetry. The taste is mild and slightly sweet, with none of the metallic intensity you might expect from organ meat. It's like eating clouds that have been flavored with Persian gardens, though the psychological aspect of consuming something that once generated sheep thoughts adds an existential dimension to the dining experience. Here's where Persian brain cuisine gets wonderfully philosophical. Different preparation methods supposedly enhance various mental attributes in the consumer. Brains soaked in rosewater were believed to improve memory and artistic inspiration, while those prepared with jasmine oil supposedly enhance romantic prowess and emotional intelligence. Quirky Persian manuscripts describe elaborate brain menus where specific preparations were prescribed for different intellectual challenges, creating a culinary system where your dinner could theoretically improve your poetry, mathematics, or diplomatic skills depending on which flours were used in the preparation process. The social implications of brain consumption were staggering even by Persian standards of luxury. Only the royal family and their most trusted advisors were permitted to consume sheep brains, creating a hierarchy where access to neural tissue determined your position in court society. The king would personally select which courtiers deserved brain privileges, making dinner invitations a form of political currency that could elevate or destroy careers. Serving inferior brains at a royal banquet could result in exile or worse, while presenting perfectly prepared neural delicacies could secure your family's fortune for generations. The medicinal properties attributed to sheep brains read like a Persian pharmacy catalog written by optimistic neuroscientists. They supposedly cured headaches, improved concentration, enhanced memory, and even prevented madness, basically functioning as edible medicine for every conceivable mental ailment. Court physicians would prescribe specific brain preparations for various intellectual challenges, creating a medical system where your doctor might literally tell you to eat more sheep thoughts to improve your own thinking capacity. The logic was simple. Consuming intelligence should theoretically make you more intelligent, though historians still argue whether this represents genuine medical belief or elaborate justification for eating something expensive and unusual. As the meal progresses, the Persian king regales the table with stories of legendary brain feasts, banquets where hundreds of sheep brains were served simultaneously, or the famous dinner where a rival king was served goat brains while being told they were sheep, causing a diplomatic incident that nearly started a war. Each tale reinforces the Persian belief that true luxury requires not just expense but genuine refinement. Anyone could afford gold, but only the most sophisticated palates could appreciate the subtle differences between various types of perfumed brain tissue. The preparation techniques developed for sheep brains influenced Persian cuisine far beyond neural delicacies. The gentle poaching methods used to preserve their delicate texture were later applied to other organ meats, while the floral infusions developed to enhance their flavor became standard techniques for preparing luxury ingredients. Persian chefs became masters of transforming challenging ingredients into elegant dishes through the careful application of aromatic oils and precise cooking methods that prioritized subtlety over intensity. The cultural impact of brain consumption extended throughout the Persian Empire, with provincial governors attempting to recreate royal brain dishes using local ingredients and techniques. The practice spread along trade routes, influencing culinary traditions from India to the Mediterranean as Persian merchants shared their recipes with foreign courts. The association between consuming brains and gaining intelligence became so widespread that it influenced folk beliefs about food and cognition that persist in various forms to this day. By the meal's conclusion, you've consumed enough sheep brains to either achieve intellectual enlightenment or develop a permanent association between floral scents and neural tissue, depending on your psychological resilience. The Persian courtiers around you finish their portions with expressions of refined satisfaction, as if they can already feel their intelligence improving with each delicate bite. Remember that black broth that tasted like liquid punishment. Suddenly consuming deliberately revolting soups seems straightforward compared to eating perfumed sheep thoughts while discussing philosophy and expecting your dinner to make you smarter. As servants clear away the silver platters, now empty except for tiny traces of rosewater that represent more wealth than most kingdoms possess, you realize that Persian brain cuisine represents the ultimate fusion of luxury and pseudoscience, creating a culinary tradition so refined that it transformed organ meat into edible intelligence enhancement. The floral essence of perfumed sheep brains still lingers in your memory as you're transported from those Persian gardens to a misty Celtic grove where ancient oaks stretch their gnarled branches toward storm clouds that promise either divine revelation or violent death. Druids in white robes gather around a stone altar carved with symbols that predate written history, their faces painted with woad that makes them look like living spirits of the forest itself. The air thrums with otherworldly energy as they prepare a beverage that makes every previous culinary adventure seem like a children's tea party. You watch in fascination and growing dread as they harvest mistletoe with golden sickles, grinding the sacred parasite into a honey-colored mead that glows with its own inner light. This isn't just alcohol. This is liquid wisdom that either grants prophetic visions or kills you outright, depending on whether the gods approve of your spiritual worthiness. The harvesting ceremony begins at the winter solstice when mistletoe reaches its peak potency, and the veil between worlds grows thin enough for mortals to glimpse divine truth. The Druids approach the sacred oak with reverence that borders on terror, knowing that one mistake in the ritual could doom not just themselves but their entire tribe to supernatural vengeance. The mistletoe must be cut with a golden blade that has never touched iron, caught in white cloth that has never been worn, and processed by hands that have been purified through days of fasting and ritual cleansing. Mainstream Celtic sources describe elaborate protocols for mistletoe preparation that treat the plant like a living deity whose cooperation must be earned through perfect adherence to ancient traditions. The brewing process transforms the Druid sanctuary into something resembling a medieval laboratory crossed with a supernatural pharmacy. The mistletoe berries are crushed in stone mortars that have been blessed by generations of priests, their toxic juices mixing with honey that's been collected from hives located in sacred groves where bees supposedly commune with forest spirits. The mixture ferments in oak barrels carved with protective runes, while Druids chant incantations that either enhance the mead's prophetic properties or serve as elaborate funeral preparations for anyone foolish enough to drink it. Your first sip delivers a flavor profile that immediately explains why this beverage is considered either divine nectar or liquid death. The initial sweetness of honey gives way to bitter, astringent notes that make your tongue tingle with what might be mystical energy or early symptoms of poisoning. The alcohol content is substantial, but there's something else. A chemical complexity that creates sensations your nervous system struggles to categorize. It tastes like drinking liquid starlight mixed with the essence of ancient forests, though the knowledge that mistletoe contains compounds that can stop your heart adds a thrilling edge of danger to every swallow. Here's where Celtic mistletoe culture gets wonderfully terrifying. Different preparation methods supposedly determined whether the mead granted wisdom or delivered death. Mistletoe harvested during the full moon was considered safest for novice drinkers, while berries collected during eclipses created potions so powerful they could kill experienced druids who underestimated their potency. Quirky Celtic manuscripts describe elaborate mistletoe menus where specific preparations were prescribed for different types of divination, creating a beverage system where your drink could theoretically reveal the future, commune with spirits, or send you directly to the other world depending on which tree the parasites were harvested from. The social implications of mistletoe mead consumption were staggering even by Celtic standards of supernatural risk-taking. Only the most experienced druids were permitted to consume the full-strength version, creating a hierarchy where access to potentially lethal beverages determined your spiritual authority. Younger priests would spend years building tolerance by consuming diluted versions, gradually working their way up to concentrations that could either grant prophetic visions or cause immediate cardiac arrest. The practice created a natural selection system where only the most spiritually gifted, or physiologically resistant, survived to become senior druids. The medicinal properties attributed to mistletoe mead read like a Celtic pharmacy catalog written by optimistic toxicologists. Small doses supposedly cured headaches and enhanced memory, while larger amounts granted the ability to see the future and communicate with spirits. The largest doses either transformed the drinker into a prophet capable of divine revelation or killed them instantly, making every sip a literal leap of faith. Celtic physicians would prescribe specific mistletoe preparations for various spiritual ailments, creating a medical system where your doctor might literally prescribe poison as treatment for existential problems. As the ceremony progresses, you notice the psychological effects of consuming something so dangerous. The combination of alcohol, natural toxins, and sheer terror at potentially dying from your beverage creates a heightened state of consciousness that borders on religious experience. Whether this represents genuine mystical enhancement, or simply the mental clarity that comes from facing mortality with every sip, the experience transforms drinking from social activity into spiritual ordeal that connects you directly to Celtic cosmology. The cultural impact of mistletoe mead extended throughout Celtic society, with warriors consuming diluted versions before battle to gain courage and farmers drinking it during planting season to ensure good harvests. The practice became so central to Celtic culture that Roman conquerors specifically targeted mistletoe groves, understanding that destroying the Druids' sacred beverage would undermine resistance more effectively than military victories. The association between mistletoe and divine wisdom became so powerful that it influenced European folklore for centuries after Celtic civilization disappeared. The preparation techniques developed for mistletoe mead influenced Celtic brewing far beyond potentially lethal beverages. The fermentation methods used to concentrate the plant's active compounds were later applied to other herbal preparations, while the ritual protocols developed to ensure spiritual safety became standard practices for handling dangerous ingredients. Celtic brewers became masters of creating beverages that balanced intoxication with spiritual enhancement, developing a brewing philosophy that prioritized transcendence over simple pleasure. By the ceremony's conclusion, you've consumed enough mistletoe mead to either achieve druidic enlightenment or face imminent death from plant toxins, depending on your spiritual worthiness and physiological resilience. The druids around you finish their portions with expressions that suggest they're already receiving visions from otherworldly sources, though it's difficult to distinguish mystical revelation from the early stages of mistletoe poisoning. Remember those perfumed sheep brains that supposedly enhanced intelligence? Suddenly eating neural tissue seems refreshingly safe compared to voluntarily consuming poison that might grant divine wisdom, or kill you instantly based on factors beyond human understanding. As the sacred grove fills with otherworldly mist that might represent spiritual energy, or simply the effects of consuming hallucinogenic plant compounds, you realize that Celtic mistletoe mead represents the ultimate gamble with mortality in pursuit of transcendence, creating a beverage tradition so dangerous that survival itself becomes proof of divine favor. The mystical tingle of mistletoe mead still courses through your veins as you're transported from those misty Celtic groves to the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean, where Roman nobles recline on silk cushions while servants prepare cocktails that would horrify modern marine biologists, and fascinate ancient toxicologists in equal measure. The azure waters of the bay shimmer with deadly beauty as fishermen return with nets full of translucent creatures that pulse with their own ethereal light. You're staring at jellyfish, not the harmless variety that wash up on beaches, but venomous Mediterranean species whose stings can paralyze grown men, now being transformed into intoxicating beverages that Roman partygoers consume with the same casual enthusiasm modern people reserve for martinis. The harvesting process requires fishermen with nerves of steel and an intimate knowledge of which jellyfish species deliver euphoric highs versus immediate death. The prized Crocera mediterranea, with its golden bell and trailing tentacles that glow like liquid amber, produces the most sought-after venom for cocktail preparation. These creatures are captured using specialized nets lined with cork to prevent the fishermen from accidentally touching their quarry, then transported in sealed amphora where they continue pulsing like living lanterns until the moment of preparation. Mainstream Roman natural histories document elaborate protocols for jellyfish collection that treat the creatures like floating pharmacies whose contents must be extracted with surgical precision. The preparation ritual transforms the villa's kitchen into something resembling an alchemist's laboratory crossed with a high-end cocktail bar. Master poisoners, yes, that was an actual profession. Carefully extract venom from the jellyfish tentacles using silver needles, collecting the precious toxins in crystal vials that gleam with opalescent beauty. The venom is then mixed with aged wine, honey, and exotic spices in ratios that have been perfected through generations of experimentation and occasional accidental death. The resulting cocktail glows with an inner light that seems to pulse in rhythm with your heartbeat, creating a beverage that's simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. Your first sip delivers a flavor profile that defies every assumption about drinkable substances. The initial taste is surprisingly sweet, with honey masking the venom's natural bitterness, followed by a tingling sensation that spreads from your tongue throughout your entire nervous system. The wine provides familiar alcoholic warmth, but there's something else, a chemical complexity that creates sensations your brain struggles to categorize. It's like drinking liquid electricity mixed with the essence of ocean storms, while the knowledge that you're consuming concentrated jellyfish venom adds a thrilling edge of danger that makes every swallow feel like an extreme sport. Here's where Roman jellyfish cocktail culture gets wonderfully insane. Different venom concentrations supposedly produce different types of intoxication. Low doses created euphoric highs that enhanced social interaction and artistic inspiration, while moderate amounts produced hallucinogenic effects that Romans believed allowed communication with sea gods. High doses either granted transcendent spiritual experiences or caused immediate paralysis and death, making every party a literal gamble with mortality. Quirky Roman accounts describe elaborate jellyfish menus where specific venom preparations were prescribed for different social occasions, creating a cocktail culture where your drink could theoretically enhance your love life, artistic abilities, or chances of meeting Neptune personally. The social implications of jellyfish cocktail consumption were staggering even by Roman standards of dangerous luxury. Only the wealthiest nobles could afford the specialized equipment and expertise required to safely prepare venomous beverages, creating a party culture where access to potentially lethal cocktails determined your social status. Hosts would compete to serve the most exotic jellyfish preparations, turning dinner parties into elaborate displays of wealth and risk tolerance that could literally kill guests who weren't prepared for the experience. The practice became so associated with elite status that some Romans would fake jellyfish poisoning symptoms to appear more sophisticated. The medicinal properties attributed to jellyfish venom read like a Roman pharmacy catalog written by optimistic marine biologists. Small doses supposedly cured arthritis and enhanced sexual performance, while larger amounts were prescribed for depression and spiritual malaise. The largest doses either granted divine visions or caused immediate death, making jellyfish cocktails the ultimate high-risk, high-reward medical treatment. Roman physicians would prescribe specific venom preparations for various ailments, creating a medical system where your doctor might literally prescribe poison cocktails as treatment for both physical and existential problems. As the party progresses, you notice the psychological effects of consuming something so dangerous. The combination of alcohol, marine toxins, and sheer terror at potentially dying from your cocktail creates a heightened state of consciousness that transforms ordinary social interaction into something approaching religious experience. Whether this represents genuine chemical enhancement, or simply the mental clarity that comes from facing mortality with every sip, the experience elevates Roman party culture to levels of intensity that modern nightlife can match. The cultural impact of jellyfish cocktails extended throughout Roman society, with different social classes developing their own versions using less dangerous marine creatures. Wealthy merchants would serve sea anemone wine, while middle-class citizens experimented with diluted preparations that provided mild tingling sensations without the risk of paralysis. The practice became so widespread that Roman military commanders banned jellyfish consumption among troops, understanding that soldiers who spent their leave consuming potentially lethal cocktails were unlikely to be combat-ready. The preparation techniques developed for jellyfish cocktails influenced Roman mixology far beyond venomous beverages. The precise extraction methods used to concentrate marine toxins were later applied to other exotic ingredients, while the dilution protocols developed to prevent accidental death became standard practices for handling dangerous substances. Roman bartenders became masters of creating beverages that balanced intoxication with survival, developing a cocktail philosophy that prioritized transcendence over simple pleasure, while maintaining enough safety margins to avoid decimating their customer base. By the party's conclusion, you've consumed enough jellyfish venom to either achieve aquatic enlightenment or face imminent paralysis from marine toxins, depending on your physiological tolerance and the bartender's measuring skills. The Roman nobles around you finished their cocktails with expressions of euphoric satisfaction, though it's difficult to distinguish genuine transcendence from the early stages of jellyfish poisoning. Remember that mistletoe mead that could grant wisdom or kill you instantly? Suddenly consuming potentially lethal plant compounds seems refreshingly terrestrial compared to voluntarily drinking concentrated jellyfish venom while discussing philosophy and expecting your cocktail to enhance your connection with sea gods. As servants clear away the glowing crystal glasses, now empty except for traces of bioluminescent residue that continue pulsing with otherworldly light, you realize that Roman jellyfish cocktails represent the ultimate fusion of luxury and marine biology, creating a party culture so dangerous that survival itself becomes the ultimate status symbol. The bioluminescent afterglow of jellyfish venom still pulses through your nervous system as you're transported from those Mediterranean shores to the heart of the Mayan jungle, where stone pyramids pierce the canopy like ancient fingers reaching toward gods who demand blood and reverence in equal measure. The air thrums with the calls of howler monkeys and the rustle of creatures that have never seen sunlight. while jade-adorned priests prepare a feast that makes every previous culinary adventure seem like a peaceful picnic. Steam rises from massive clay vessels as servants tend fires that have burned continuously for generations, their flames fed with sacred woods that cost more than entire villages. You're staring at a banquet where the main course still has scales, claws, and the kind of prehistoric presence that makes you wonder if you've accidentally time-traveled to the age of dinosaurs. The procurement process for royal iguana involves hunting expeditions that resemble military campaigns crossed with religious pilgrimages. Mayan warriors ventured deep into sacred cenotes and temple ruins where the largest iguanas bask on stones that have witnessed centuries of human sacrifice, their emerald scales gleaming like living jewels in the dappled jungle light. These aren't ordinary lizards. They're essentially dragon descendants whose capture requires elaborate rituals to appease the feathered serpent Kukulkan, who supposedly grants his blessing to hunters worthy of claiming his earthly representatives. Mainstream Mayan codices describe hunting protocols that involve astronomical calculations, ritual purification, and offerings of jade and cacao to ensure the iguana's spirits consent to becoming royal sustenance. The preparation ceremony transforms the temple kitchen into something resembling a prehistoric cooking show directed by priests who take their culinary responsibilities as seriously as their religious duties. The iguanas are treated with reverence that borders on worship, their bodies painted with sacred symbols before being stuffed with a mixture of corn, beans, chilies, and chocolate that creates flavor combinations your modern palate has never experienced. The entire creatures are then wrapped in banana leaves that have been blessed by shamans and slow-roasted in underground ovens lined with volcanic stones that retain heat for days. The cooking process takes so long that priests perform elaborate ceremonies to ensure the iguana's spirits remain content during their transformation from sacred reptiles to royal feast. Your first bite delivers flavors that immediately transport you to a world where cuisine and cosmology intersect in ways that modern cooking can't replicate. Iguana meat tastes like a cross between chicken and fish, with a texture that's surprisingly tender despite the creature's armored appearance. The stuffing creates complex flavor layers that build with each chew. Corn provides earthy sweetness, beans add protein richness, chilies deliver heat that builds slowly, and chocolate contributes bitter notes that tie everything together in combinations that seem almost alchemical. It's genuinely delicious, which somehow makes the experience more surreal. You're enjoying a meal that required capturing creatures that look like they escaped from Jurassic Park. Here's where Mayan iguana culture gets wonderfully mystical. Different iguana species supposedly granted different supernatural abilities to those who consumed them. Green iguanas enhance connection with forest spirits, while the rare blue iguanas found only in sacred cenotes were believed to grant prophetic visions and the ability to communicate with ancestors. Quirky Mayan texts describe elaborate iguana menus where specific preparations were prescribed for different royal ceremonies, creating a culinary system where your dinner could theoretically improve your ability to rule kingdoms, predict eclipses, or negotiate with gods depending on which reptile you consumed and how it was prepared. The social implications of iguana consumption were staggering even by Mayan standards of hierarchical complexity. Only the royal family and their most trusted advisors were permitted to consume the largest iguanas, creating a dining hierarchy where the size of your reptile determined your political importance. Kings would personally select which courtiers deserved iguana privileges, making dinner invitations a form of political currency that could elevate families to nobility or condemn them to social obscurity. The practice became so associated with royal power that some Mayan cities went to war over access to the best iguana hunting grounds. The medicinal properties attributed to iguana meat read like a Mayan pharmacy catalog written by optimistic herpetologists. Different body parts supposedly cured various ailments. The tail enhanced fertility. The legs provided strength for long journeys, and the heart granted courage in battle. The liver was considered particularly powerful, supposedly improving the consumer's ability to interpret dreams and communicate with supernatural forces. Mayan physicians would prescribe specific iguana preparations for everything from headaches to existential crises, creating a medical system where your doctor might literally tell you to eat more prehistoric reptiles to improve your spiritual health. As the feast progresses, the Mayan king shares stories of legendary iguana hunts, expeditions where warriors captured iguanas so large they required entire teams to transport, or the famous hunt where a rival king was served ordinary lizards while being told they were sacred iguanas, causing a diplomatic incident that nearly triggered a war between city-states. Each tale reinforces the Mayan belief that consuming powerful creatures transfers their essence to the eater, making dinner a form of spiritual communion that connects rulers directly to the natural world's most formidable inhabitants. The preparation techniques developed for iguana feasts influenced Mayan cuisine far beyond reptilian delicacies. The underground roasting methods used to tenderize tough iguana meat were later applied to other game, while the complex stuffing combinations developed to complement reptilian flavors became standard techniques for preparing luxury ingredients. Mayan chefs became masters of creating harmony between disparate ingredients, developing a culinary philosophy that treated cooking as a form of alchemy where proper combinations could transform ordinary ingredients into transcendent experiences. The cultural impact of iguana consumption extended throughout the Mayan Empire, with provincial governors attempting to recreate royal iguana dishes using local reptiles and traditional techniques. The practice spread along trade routes, influencing culinary traditions from Mexico to Honduras as Mayan merchants shared their recipes with foreign courts. The association between consuming powerful animals and gaining their attributes became so central to Mayan culture that it influenced religious beliefs about the relationship between humans and the natural world. By the feast's conclusion, you've consumed enough sacred iguana to either achieve reptilian enlightenment or develop a permanent association between jungle sounds and dinner preparation, depending on your ability to process the psychological implications of eating creatures that seem more mythological than culinary. The Mayan courtiers around you finish their portions with expressions of satisfied reverence, as if they can feel the iguana's ancient wisdom flowing through their veins. Remember those jellyfish cocktails that could paralyze or transcend you? Suddenly consuming venomous marine creatures seems straightforward compared to eating prehistoric reptiles while expecting your dinner to enhance your ability to communicate with feathered serpent gods and rule jungle empires. As servants clear away the banana leaf wrappings, now empty except for bones that represent more spiritual power than most people encounter in their lifetimes, you realize that Mayan iguana feasts represent the ultimate fusion of cuisine and cosmology, creating a dining tradition so sacred that every bite connects the consumer directly to the supernatural forces that govern the natural world. The ancient wisdom of Mayan iguana still courses through your consciousness as you're transported one final time to the misty mountains of ancient China, where emperors built their palaces so high that clouds drift through the courtyards like visiting spirits. The air is thin and crystalline, perfumed with incense that costs more than kingdoms, while servants in silk robes approach carrying bowls that seem to contain liquid starlight captured from the heavens themselves. You're staring at the ultimate expression of Chinese culinary obsession, bird's nest soup, where the saliva of tiny swifts has been transformed into the most expensive aphrodisiac in human history, a delicacy so precious that wars have been fought over access to the caves where these aerial architects construct their edible homes from their own bodily secretions. The harvesting process reads like a combination of extreme sports and religious pilgrimage, requiring climbers who scale limestone cliffs that rise from the South China Sea like the spines of sleeping dragons. These aren't ordinary bird nests. They're architectural marvels constructed entirely from swift saliva that hardens into translucent, ivory-colored structures that cling to cave walls hundreds of feet above crashing waves. The birds spend weeks secreting the protein-rich substance, building their homes one strand at a time in a process that transforms bodily fluids into edible gold. Mainstream Chinese texts describe elaborate protocols for nest collection that involve lunar calendars, ritual purification, and offerings to mountain spirits who supposedly guard the caves where these aerial treasures are found. The preparation ritual transforms the imperial kitchen into something resembling a laboratory where alchemists attempt to distill the essence of flight itself. The nests are soaked in pure spring water for hours, their translucent fibers slowly dissolving into a gelatinous broth that shimmers with opalescent beauty. Master chefs treat each nest like a precious manuscript, carefully removing any remaining feathers or debris while preserving the delicate structure that represents months of avian labor. The cooking process involves gentle simmering in broths flavored with ginseng, rock sugar, and other ingredients that cost more than most people's annual income, creating a soup that glows with inner light like liquid moonbeams captured in porcelain bowls. Your first spoonful delivers a flavor profile that defies every expectation about edible substances. The taste is surprisingly subtle, slightly sweet with mineral notes that remind you of mountain springs and morning mist. The texture is the real revelation, gelatinous strands that slip across your tongue like liquid silk, creating sensations that your mouth has never experienced. It's not particularly flavorful in conventional terms, but there's something almost supernatural about consuming something so rare and expensive that emperors have bankrupted their treasuries pursuing it. The psychological impact of eating bird saliva that costs more than gold adds layers of complexity that transforms simple consumption into an almost mystical experience. Here's where Chinese bird's nest culture gets wonderfully obsessive. Different nest types supposedly provided different benefits to those wealthy enough to afford them. White nests from young birds were considered the purest, enhancing beauty and longevity, while red nests stained with minerals supposedly improved vitality and sexual performance. Quirky Chinese medical texts describe elaborate nest classifications where specific preparations were prescribed for different ailments, creating a culinary pharmacy where your soup could theoretically cure everything from wrinkles to existential despair depending on which cave the saliva was harvested from and how it was prepared. The economic implications of birds' nest consumption were staggering even by Chinese standards of imperial excess. A single bowl of premium nest soup could cost as much as a house, while the rarest varieties commanded prices that could fund military campaigns or public works projects. The nest trade created specialized industries, cliff climbers, nest graders, and preparation experts whose entire careers revolved around transforming birds' spit into liquid wealth. Some wealthy families maintained private nest caves, essentially running avian saliva farms whose sole purpose was producing tiny amounts of incredibly expensive soup ingredients. The social implications of nest consumption extended far beyond simple luxury dining. Serving birds' nest soup demonstrated not just wealth but refined taste and cultural sophistication that separated the truly elite from mere millionaires. The soup became a symbol of Chinese civilization's ability to transform the most unlikely ingredients into transcendent experiences, proving that human ingenuity could find value and beauty in the most unexpected places. Emperors would serve nest soup to foreign dignitaries as a demonstration of China's cultural superiority, creating diplomatic situations where refusing to consume bird saliva could cause international incidents. The medicinal properties attributed to bird's nest soup read like a Chinese pharmacy catalog written by optimistic ornithologists. The soup supposedly enhanced complexion, improved lung function, boosted immune systems, and provided anti-aging benefits that could extend life for decades. Traditional Chinese medicine practitioners prescribed specific nest preparations for various conditions, creating a medical system where your doctor might literally prescribe bird spit as treatment for everything from respiratory problems to romantic difficulties. The logic was elegant. If birds could fly, consuming their saliva should theoretically grant humans some measure of their aerial grace and freedom. As the imperial banquet concludes, you notice the psychological effects of consuming something so rare and expensive. The combination of subtle flavors, unusual textures, and the knowledge that you're eating something worth more than most people's lifetime earnings creates a heightened awareness that borders on spiritual experience. Whether this represents genuine physiological enhancement, or simply the mental clarity that comes from consuming liquid wealth, the experience transforms eating from simple nourishment into a form of edible meditation that connects you directly to Chinese concepts of harmony between humans and nature. The cultural impact of bird's nest soup extended throughout Chinese society and beyond, with the practice spreading along trade routes to influence culinary traditions from Southeast Asia to the Middle East. The soup became a symbol of Chinese culinary sophistication, representing the civilization's ability to find extraordinary value in ordinary natural phenomena through patience, skill, and an almost supernatural attention to detail. The association between consuming rare ingredients and achieving transcendence became so central to Chinese culture that it influenced philosophical beliefs about the relationship between material consumption and spiritual development. The preparation techniques developed for bird's nest soup influenced Chinese cuisine far beyond avian saliva, with the gentle cooking methods and precise timing required to preserve the nest's delicate structure becoming standard practices for preparing other luxury ingredients. Chinese chefs became masters of extracting maximum value from minimal ingredients, developing a culinary philosophy that prioritized subtlety and refinement over quantity and intensity. By the meal's conclusion, you've consumed enough bird saliva to either achieve aerial enlightenment or develop a permanent appreciation for the lengths humans will go to transform unusual ingredients into symbols of ultimate luxury. The Chinese courtiers around you finish their portions with expressions of satisfied transcendence, as if they can feel the essence of flight flowing through their veins. Remember those sacred iguanas that connected you to feathered serpent gods? Suddenly consuming prehistoric reptiles seems straightforward compared to eating bird spit that costs more than kingdoms while expecting your soup to grant you the secrets of eternal youth and supernatural beauty. As the final course concludes and you reflect on this incredible journey through history's most shocking culinary traditions, you realize that each dish represents humanity's endless creativity in transforming the impossible into the edible, the forbidden into the desirable, and the revolting into the transcendent. From Roman fish sauce that smelled like death but tasted like paradise, to Chinese bird saliva that cost more than gold but promised eternal youth, these ancient delicacies reveal our species' remarkable ability to find meaning, status, and even spirituality in the most unlikely places. The servants clear away the precious bowls as mist drifts through the palace courtyards, carrying with it the whispers of all the civilizations you've visited tonight. Each culture found its own path to culinary transcendence, whether through voluntary suffering, dangerous luxury, or the transformation of the mundane into the magical. These dishes may shock modern sensibilities, but they represent something profound about human nature, our endless quest to push boundaries, challenge assumptions, and find extraordinary experiences in the most ordinary world. As you settle back into your own time and place, the flavors and memories of these ancient feasts linger like ghosts of civilizations past. The garum still tingles on your tongue, the peacock's glass eyes still haunt your peripheral vision, and somewhere in the distance, you can almost hear the whisper of swift wings in limestone caves where tiny architects continue building their edible homes from liquid starlight, one precious strand at a time. These shocking dishes remind us that what we consider normal today might seem equally bizarre to future generations, and that the human capacity for culinary creativity knows no bounds. Whether we're fermenting fish guts in Mediterranean sunshine or climbing impossible cliffs to harvest bird saliva in the name of eternal youth and transcendent dining experiences,